Good morning. My name is Robin DiPietro Wells, and I am a program coordinator for OneOp. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's session, Harmony of Expression, Exploring Social and Emotional Development in Middle Childhood Through Expressive Art Approaches. In case you're joining us for the first time, I'd like to give you a brief tour of our webinar platform so you can find your way around. Hopefully, you're currently able to view the slides that we're sharing. If you're unable to see them or have any other difficulties, please email us at contact@oneop.org for tech support. As some of you may have already done, we look forward to having you join us in the chat pod for conversation and questions. To embed the chat pod so you don't miss any links or conversation, simply place your cursor over the shared slides. You will then see a toolbar pop up across the bottom of your screen. From there, just click the chat bubble icon. When typing questions or comments, please be sure to select everyone from the response options drop-down menu so everyone's able to view them in the chat pod. Note that the slides and resources are available for download on the event page for today's session. We'll be covering continuing education information at the end of the webinar, so please stay tuned if you're interested in continuing education credits or a certificate of attendance. We thank you for joining us as we continue our partnership with the Department of Defense and the U.S. Department of Agriculture to expand the readiness, knowledge, and networks of the professionals supporting our military service members and their families. Today, we have, we have Dr. Kevin Tan and Miss Felicia Lee with us. Dr. Tan has experience as a school social worker and collaborating closely with parents, educators, and school administrators to promote youth identity, agency, and a sense of belonging in support of positive youth development. Dr. Tan currently serves as the Associate Dean for Engagement, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the School of Social Work at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Ms. Lee is a licensed clinical social worker with 2 decades of clinical experience spanning diverse populations. Her professional journey was shaped by direct service work with children and youth in Chicago. This experience sparked her realization of the transformative power, of the creative process for young people. Specializing in expressive arts therapy, Ms. Lee is passionate about its ability to facilitate emotional exploration beyond verbal communication, catering to individuals of all artistic levels. Before I turn things over to Dr. Tan, you will want to be sure you have a copy of the slides that can be found at the bottom of the webinar event page under Event Materials. A link to that page has been placed in the chat. This time, I'm going to mute my microphone for Dr. Tan to begin the presentation.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to join all of you this morning. And, let's start off with reviewing today's objective for this session. And what we would like to achieve, it's 4 goals here. The first is for us to identify at least one social and emotional challenge faced by individuals in the middle childhood years related to issues of transitions, grief, and loss. And the second is to gain an introductory understanding of the potential of artistic expression to support youth social and emotional development. And the third objective is to describe at least one principle of art-based work and its effectiveness in addressing emotional regulation, identity, formation, and relational dynamics. And the last objective is to really understand the foundational principles and actively explore at least one form of art-based medium as a tool for processing and expressing emotions while working with young people. So let's start off with an introduction to the middle school years, the middle childhood years. Now, the middle childhood years, it marks a critical period in a child's development as they transition from early childhood into adolescence. While not yet into the throes of adolescence, these few years, they lay the foundation for the changes and the challenges to come. And the middle school years are a period of gradual preparation for the journey towards adulthood, where young people, where children, they start to develop their sense of self and their place in the world. And it's also during these 3 years, these few years, that we see various changes in their developmental growth. The first area in the physical development, the physical domain, is this is where we actually start to see children experience steady growth in their height and weight, along with improvements in motor skills and coordination. This period is also characterized by the development of improved muscle control, and the refinement of fine motor skills. Now, the second domain of developmental change here, cognitive development. And during this couple of years, this is where we start to see their cognitive abilities. It starts to become more sophisticated during the middle childhood years. Children begin to think more logically, they solve problems independently, and they start to understand abstract concepts. And this is where we also see them making significant progress in language development, vocabulary expansion, and literary skills. And the last domain of developmental change in the middle childhood years is this whole area about psychosocial development. And this is where the middle childhood years is marked by significant social and emotional growth. Children, they start to form deeper friendships, develop empathy and perspective taking, and they become increasingly aware of societal norms and expectations. And this is where they also begin to develop a sense of identity and self-esteem, influenced by interactions with their peers and adults. And across these three domains, it is really important for us to also understand the periods of developmental change, as it allows us to recognize the unique challenges, needs, and capacities of individuals at different stages of life. And such knowledge enables us to provide the appropriate support, guidance, and intervention to promote healthy development and well-being across the lifespan. Additionally, understanding developmental changes help us to appreciate the diversity and complexity of human growth. It fosters empathy, understanding, and effective communication in our interactions with others. And there are basically two models of understanding developmental growth. First, we can understand it through a stage-based approach, where there are some developmental theories that propose that children progress through distinct different stages of development. And there's also another school of thought there, which emphasizes the continuous and gradual changes in development rather than distinct stages. For example, there is a psychosocial theory that emphasizes the importance of social interactions and cultural influences in shaping young people's development. And from this perspective, the middle school years is seen as a period of ongoing growth influenced by their social experiences and cultural context. And here I would like to emphasize and hone in on one example of a stage-based model, which is the Erikson stages of psychosocial development. And under this perspective, it outlines 8 stages where individuals go through across the lifespan, each characterized by a unique psychosocial crisis or conflict. And these stages encompasses various aspects of development, including social, emotional, and identity formulation. And here's an overview of each of these stages there. Very briefly, the first stage from birth to first year, which is really about the issues of developing trust and mistrust. And this is where infants start to learn or trust or mistrust their caregivers based on the consistency or the quality of care that they receive. The desired outcome for this is for them to really develop a sense of trust, which lays the foundation for future relationships, as well as to develop a basic sense of security in the world. Very quickly, the second stage from there is really about autonomy versus shame and doubt. And this is where toddlers begin to assert their own independence by exploring their environment and making changes. The desired outcome from this stage is for them to develop a sense of autonomy and self-control while avoiding feelings of shames and doubts about their own abilities. Moving forward, between the ages of 4 to 5 years, this is where it's really the issue about developing initiative versus guilt. And preschoolers, they more often than not engage in purposeful activities to take initiative in play and social interactions. And the desired outcome for this is for young people to really develop a sense of initiative and confidence in one's ability while avoiding feelings of guilt for asserting themselves. And this is where we get into the stage of the middle childhood years, between the ages of 6 to 12, which is really about the issues of developing an industry versus inferiority. And this is where school-age children, they focus on mastering new skills and gaining competency in various activities. And the desired outcome here is really to develop a sense of industry while avoiding feelings of inadequacy. And at this stage, it's also important for us to consider about the stage after the middle school years, which is really the adolescent years from the years of 13 to 18, which is really about the issues of identity versus role confusion. And this is where adolescents start to explore their identities, their values, and their beliefs while navigating their social roles and relationships. The desired outcome is for them to develop a sense of self and a clear identity while avoiding confusion and uncertainty about one's role in the world. And it's really important for us. I will not go through the whole list here. We could, take a look at it from this slide here. But it's really important for us to really consider each stage of Erickson's stages of psychosocial development that actually represents a critical juncture in development. And under this model, the assumption is that the successful resolution of each stage contributes to healthy psychosocial functioning and the overall well-being across a lifespan. And this is why it's really important for us to focus on the 6 to 12 years, on the middle school years there. It's because it lays the foundation for the period of adolescence. And again, considering the life task for the middle school years, what are the implications for us? What are the implications for young people's development? Let me offer 3 quick points over here. First, positive experiences during the middle childhood years, such as encouragement from parents, teachers, success in academic and extracurricular activities. These all contribute to the development of a strong sense of industry. Second point I would make here, negative experiences such as criticism, failure, the lack of support, it can lead to feelings of inferiority, and it determines and it undermines a child's confidence and motivation. Third point over here, the middle school years is a critical time for building self-esteem, resiliency, and a sense of competence that will influence their future academic and social successes. Now let's move on from here. This is a more detailed breakdown of the key issues in the middle school years concerning adolescents' identity, self-concept, and their self-esteem. Now, with regards to adolescent identity, here we're also talking about, their own personal dimension of identity, where the middle childhood years marks the development of a deeper exploration of who they are. They start to develop a clearer sense of their likes, their dislikes, their strengths, their weaknesses. They may also experiment with different roles and activities to understand who they are as individuals. There's also the social dimension of their own identity, which is at this stage, children become more aware of the social comparisons and how they fit into the various social groups. For instance, how they fit within their family, their peers, and within schools. This is where we start to see them seeking validation and acceptance from peers, while also asserting their own identity within these groups. The second key issue here is regarding the notion about self-concepts. And self-concepts can come across multiple forms here. First concept, their true self. And this refers to the core essence of an individuals, including their values, their beliefs, their personality traits. Now, in the middle childhood years, children begin to develop a sense of their true self as they become more self-aware and become more introspective. There is also the notion about the false self as well. And this is where it represents aspect of a young person's identity that is shaped by external influences, such as societal expectation or the desire to please others. And the middle childhood years is a period where children may start to conform to societal norms or adopt roles that are not authentic to who they really are, their true selves. There is also the notion of the public self. And this is where this whole concept of how individuals present themselves to others. And in the middle childhood years, children become increasingly conscious about their public image and may adjust their behavior to fit social expectations or to gain acceptance from others. And the last concept here, the last self-concept that I'll highlight here, is known as their possible or their future selves. And this is where the middle childhood years is a time where children begin to envision their future selves and to set goals for themselves. They may start to explore different career paths, hobbies, and interests that align with their aspiration and values. And this last point, the last key issue that I highlight here, revolves around the whole notion about self-esteem. And self-esteem refers to how individuals they feel about themselves and their overall sense of self-worth. In middle childhood years, their self-esteem is influenced by various factors, including academic successes, social relationships, and feedback from their caregivers and peers. Children with a high sense of self-esteem, they tend to have a more positive image, they feel confident about their abilities, and have a strong sense of self-worth. Conversely, children with a low sense of self-esteem may doubt their own abilities, they feel insecure in social contexts, and may have a negative perception of themselves. And overall, the middle childhood years is a critical period for the development of their self-esteem. So navigating these three key issues in the middle childhood years, it lays the foundation for healthy identity development. And this is really critical as young people, as they progress through the stage of adolescence and into adulthood. And to tie all these three key issues together, I would like to introduce this whole notion about Cooley's looking glass concept, which really provides insights into how individuals develop their sense of self through social interactions and perceptions of others. And this notion about the looking glass concept is particularly prominent in the middle school years. And this theory suggests that our own self-concept is shaped by how we believe others are perceiving us, reflecting like mirrors or the looking glass. And this looking glass concept, it involves two main components. Firstly, it's about us imagining how others perceive us. How young people, how middle school age young people, they imagine how others would perceive them. This is where they really consider the reactions and judgments of others towards them, whether it's real or imagined. And it's also during this period of time that they start to really be more conscious about interpreting other people's reactions. Individuals may interpret these perceived reactions and judgments from others. They may start to internalize some of these interpretations and use it to form opinions about themselves. So this looking glass concept, it really highlights the social nature of the self and emphasizes the importance of interpersonal relationship, healthy interpersonal relationships, and the social context of shaping young people's identity. It emphasizes that self-concept is not fixed, but rather is continuously influenced through our interactions with others. And I'd like to hone in a little more about these whole notions about what happens when there is grief and loss, especially during these middle school years. Now, it's also important for us to also understand that notions about grief and loss, they are universal human experiences that impacts individuals across all ages. For instance, how young people in early childhood, when they actually we are actually impacted by grief and loss, this is where children may struggle to fully comprehend the concept of death and loss, of grief and loss. At one moment, they may react with confusion, fear, and distress, while confronted with the death of a loved one or a pet. Young children may also experience grief and loss through various behaviors such as crying, tantrums, and seeking comfort from their caregivers. However, it's really interesting for us to note that their understanding of grief and loss may be limited, and they may exhibit what is known as magical thinking, believing that the deceased may return. And despite their emotional reactions, young people at this age of early childhood, they may often demonstrate their ability to really quickly shift their focus back to play and their daily activities relatively quickly after experiencing loss. As we move on from there, by late childhood, this is typically around the middle school age years, children will begin to develop a more nuanced understanding of grief and loss. They may really start to understand and grasp with concepts such as the irreversibility or the inevitability of death, grief, or loss as well. Children in these age groups are also better able to comprehend that grief and loss in some aspects is irreversible. And this not only affects the deceased, but also those around them as well. They may also start to understand that the notion about grief and loss is a natural part of the life cycle and that everyone will experience grief and loss at some point. However, some young people as well during this age of the middle childhood years may also characterize what is known as personal fables, believing that their experiences are unique and exceptional, which sometimes can make it particularly challenging for them to really cope with grief and loss. They may struggle with empathizing with other people's grief and loss while also becoming overwhelmed by their own emotions. And overall, understanding grief and loss is a dynamic process that evolves across the lifespan. The middle childhood years represents a critical period of development. This is where children they begin to grapple with the realities of loss and to develop their own sense of cognitive and emotional tools necessary for coping with grief and loss. And the experiences of grief and loss, can complicate this whole developmental process in several ways. And this is where, in this second half of the session, Miss Lee would actually share with us artistic form in which we can actually develop and manage and work with young people as it relates to coping with grief and loss. But this is also where it's really important for us to also understand the notion about grief and loss and how that impacts areas such as their own identity development. Grief and loss can disrupt this whole process of identity development by prompting adolescents to really question about their own identity and a sense of stability. They may struggle to reconcile their own personal experiences of loss with their own emerging identity. And these sometimes could also lead to feelings of confusion, insecurity, or even disconnection with others. Middle school age adolescents, they are also refining their own social and emotional skills during these years, such as empathy, communication, conflict resolution. They're also learning to navigate complex social dynamics and peer relationships. And grief and loss can challenge adolescents' social and emotional skills by exposing them to really intense emotions and unfamiliar situations. They may also struggle to communicate their feelings effectively or to provide support to their peers who are also grieving. Additionally, adolescents may also feel isolated or misunderstood if their peers do not know how to respond to their grief. Grief and loss can also impact and disrupt adolescents' efforts to also affirm their identity by also introducing feelings of vulnerability, insecurity, or even inadequacy. Young people may also worry about how their grief may be perceived by others, and they may also fear being judged or rejected for even expressing their emotions over grief and loss. And ultimately, at the end of it, it's really important for us to also highlight and help young people develop their own coping strategies, especially as it relates to grief and loss. Grief and loss can challenge adolescents, young people's coping strategies by overwhelming them with really intense emotions or triggering maladaptive coping behaviors such as avoidance, denial, or aggression. And adolescents may struggle to find effective ways to process their grief and loss, and some of them might actually turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms. And this is where, in this session here, we would really like to share with all of you strategies, specifically as it relates to artistic expression, on how we can actually help young people, especially those middle school age, to navigate the complexities of identity development, social relationships, and emotional regulations. It is really important for us to support adolescents through this whole process, especially those who experience grief and loss, while providing them with opportunities for self-expression, validation, and healthy coping strategies, while also fostering a supportive and understanding environment within their own social networks and communities. So this is where at this stage here, I would like to take a little pause right now, all right, just to recap, some of those things that I've shared. And I'll be really interested if you could also type in chat right now before I hand things over to Miss Lee for the second half of this session. Well, I'd be really interested that in your own experience, I would invite all of you to share one common social and emotional issue among young people that you're noticing today, especially those in the middle childhood years. And I'd like to invite you to drop it in chat right now, where we could actually see some of these responses. All right, I'm seeing a number of responses that are coming in. We're talking about issues about acceptance, low self-esteem, perfectionism, peer pressure, making friends, negative interactions with peers. One of you mentioned about the effects of bullying. I think this is a really interesting point there. More often than not, I see this a lot in a lot of the middle schools that I work with. Bullying, it comes across in multiple aspects. You could have verbal bullying, You could even have like non-verbal aspects of it, relational bullying. I think this is really an important aspect we should highlight and we should pay greater attention to, especially in the middle school years. All right. One of you mentioned about the influence of social media and self-regulation skills. I think that is really a really important point over here. The effect of social media, the social context of young people around us, the way in which they interpret themselves based off messages that they are receiving, from the social media around. I think that is really an important aspects. I am seeing a number of you are highlighting issues as it relates to the social media, cyberbullying, their effect on self-esteem. I think that is really a key critical aspect. I think this is also a really interesting point there. Communication with parents and their trust level with adults. I think that's also, one of the purpose of this session here. It's for us as the adults, as parents, caregivers, or even professionals working with young people, how best would we be able to help them foster their sense of communication, tighten the sense of communication there, so much so that we can actually help young people, the middle school years, to actually explore their own identity. All right. I'm just looking through, other aspects of it. Poor self-esteem, unrealistic expectations. All right. I see Robin has also mentioned about self-regulation skills. Yep, it's a big problem, in our schools locally. I think this whole notion about self-regulation ultimately also goes into this whole aspect about effective coping strategies. How best we will to manage, the emotions that we are experiencing. And I think it's also important. I think this is where Miss Lee's, second half of the session, where she starts to go a lot deeper into some of these practical aspects of it, artistic way in which they can really express their emotions, so that we can also help them to explore who they are, their identity, while at the same time teaching them, guiding them with appropriate coping strategies from there. All right. So that is all I have for you at this stage of the presentation. And I think I'll hand it over to Miss Lee right now.
Good morning, everyone. I'm hoping that everyone can hear me and everything is like technology going as well as we hope for. Fingers crossed. I'm really excited about like today's session, and we've been like kind of planning and since we posed the idea, and to be really authentic about like what I'm offering today, as we're going to talk a little bit. Oh, slide. Okay, 1 second. The slide jumped ahead of me. Yeah, that's what was I doing before we start at 9:45 Central Time? I was just like playing with my sound drum, and I was like trying to calm myself. Well, this is a webinar. We're trying to like get things going, get things rolling. And that's what I was doing. And then at this moment, I want to give some space for everyone. I can see about 50 over of you and this webinar, just to kind of like check in with yourself as we are talking about something more artistic and expressive, right? If you can give yourself like a word as we talk about this webinar, maybe if you want to type your word in the chat box, or if you want to do a little gesture for yourself, one word, just to kind of like express where you are in this moment, where you are like kind of preparing to enter to this webinar. So maybe a little quick 30 seconds check-in, just to kind of feel where you are before I kind of roll on with what is expressive arts. Okay. And if you have a gesture, try to kind of see where this is, and if even after like this whole session, where that gesture is going for you. I hear some, or I see some comments, excited, curious. I'm a gesture person. Where there's no video for today, but you can imagine my hands are moving, and definitely lots of things are like kind of like going on over here. So I will hopeful, interested. I see that. I want to go ahead and do a little bit of kind of like definition. What is expressive arts? My journey to expressive art started about, I would say, 17 years ago in Singapore. And then subsequently, over the last 7 to 8 years, I got more deeper into this work and realizing how much growth I can kind of offer to the community and my clients and myself. And that's when I got deeper into it with a more extensive training and certification and going through like a process of certification for myself. However, to introduce to all of you helping profession providers, healthcare providers, working with children and youth in particular, this work is very welcoming. We really kind of like invite individuals to kind of like learn more about it, and gradually you can grow from that. So what is expressive arts? It's the combination of visual arts, movement, drama, music, writing, and other creative processes to foster personal growth and community development. When we talk about visual arts, there can be different mediums such as like, paper, it can be, clay, it can be soft watercolor, it can be like markers, it can be poster. And we talk about movement. It's not necessarily we're looking at like dance, choreograph, but we're just talking about even day-to-day movement. And that's where I invited all of you to start off with a little gesture for your heart for today. Like it could be like a finger movement, it could be even noticing your eye movement, it could be just turning your head around, that sort of movement. And I'll explain further how this all ties in together. Drama, it could be kind of enacting, and it could be improv. It could be like just kind of creating a short story for what your experience is. And when we talk about music, again, one doesn't need to be like musically trained, but more so using that, it could be an instrument, it can be using your mouth, you can be using like a table or something very simple just to create some sound and rhythm. And writing, I think most of us have acquired the skills of writing over our education process. So it could be just using simple words, as I kind of introduced to everyone, just necessarily have to be long statements or paragraph. And as all these creative processes add up, we are exploring the individual feelings and experience and creating meaning. So we can see expressive arts can be practiced in various setting and by a wide range of practitioners. Just to give a little background, there is the International Expressive Arts Therapy Association, IATA, which require professional registration and to become like a REES, which is an expressive arts consultant educator, or READ, expressive arts therapist. However, these are for individuals who really want to, kind of further this education and get certification. For everyone else who was just like, what is all this? I'm interested. You're very welcome to just join in, participate, absorb, and learn, and just kind of like test it out with your community and really try to kind of support them as we go along. And there are also various Facebook group that people can search under expressive arts. Feel free to kind of like look it up online. And that's my own journey. I started off untrained in expressive arts, participate in lots of Facebook group, lots of like kind of workshop. And over time, I made the decision to be on track to become a REIT eventually. And here are some of the work I've done, and these images are like shared with permission. I want to talk about specifically as we talk about like grief and losses just now, as Dr. Tan has mentioned. On the right hand side, there's one image that's kind of orange background with a red heart, and that is an image created in support of the feeling of grief towards a loss of a family member. And how that process was created was using active visualization, meditation, and in that process, creating this image and writing subsequently just to kind of process some of the feelings that go underneath. As you can see, again, I mentioned there is more than just one medium to explore this process. We might be able to use clay if your setting allow. Sometimes, um, clay can be really complicated for um like certain setting that you might not have had access to, like a kiln. So for children, I really like magic model. I don't have an example in the picture, but magic model, subsequently I'll show another picture. It's really helpful with children because they're pretty clean and they can be quick and they air dry like within 24 hours. And then the other two images, they kind of came from some other quick workshop through just kind of noticing the changes, the transition. When we go through like transition and seasons of changes, how we can use that as a kind of like a prompt to facilitate some of these art processes as well. I'm gonna go ahead and introduce some of the founders of expressive arts. And I'm going to read out loud this part. I'm intrigued by what I call the creative connection, the enhancing interplay among movement, art, writing, and sound. Moving with awareness, for example, opens us to profound feelings, which can then be expressed in color, line, or form. When we write immediately after the movement in art, a free flow emerges in the process, sometimes resulting in poetry. The creative connection process that I've developed stimulates such exploration. It is like the unfolding petals of a lotus blossom on a summer day. In a warm, accepting environment, the petals open to reveal the flower's inner essence. So I'm want to introduce everyone to Natalie Rogers. She's one of the founders of Expressive Arts and kind of like embracing the humanistic psychology and using this particular approach. That's one area that we're going to dive deeper for today. So Natalie Rogers is also the daughter of Carl Roger. For some of you who might be familiar with psychology or had some training in that aspect, you might be familiar with the Rogerian approach where it is person-centered and there are some kind of foundational beliefs that support that, which we will kind of explore slightly later. Oh, okay. And then another founder there of Expressive Arts is Sean McNiff. So Sean McNiff is an artist, author, and a professor at Lesley University. He has many, many great books that I read, and I think that is another, great resource for individuals who are interested in this work and would like more understanding of this. And I'm going to read this out loud. All of the elements of creative expression, imagery, sound, gesture, words, enactment, movement work together. All are aspects of the human imagination and cannot be separated in art and in life. Now pause here a little just for people to kind of absorb. And why am I reading out loud? I think this is very intentional on my part. I think a lot of times individuals, we participate by just looking, just kind of like using our eyes to read. However, a lot of times in my clinical work with my clients, sometimes even the idea of reading out loud a statement can evoke a lot of different feeling, different kind of expression, and creating new meaning in that. And sometimes it's also interesting. Some individuals might write and they have so much hesitation of reading out loud on what they wrote. And that is another layer of probably overcoming some of that internal insecurity, self-esteem, things that some of you mentioned in the webinar chat just now. Okay, next slide, please. And we have this if-then theory of the person-centered expressive arts from Natalie Rogers that I would like to just kind of briefly go through with everyone. So if we create a psychologically safe and free environment through our deep philosophical belief in worth, dignity, and capacity for self-direction of the person, and we stimulate and encourage people to reveal themselves through expressive movement, art, sound, writing, and psychodrama. Then participants will be able to tap into their wellspring of creativity, their inner essence or truth, becoming authentic, self-confident, and compassionate. Lastly, this process of integration allows the individuals to be in touch with themselves. So we're kind of like laying the ground of even like kind of facilitating expressive arts, like how this environment can be to promote that safety and free. And I'm really excited to see some of the webinar chat that individuals sharing some of their ideas and process. A great idea with puppets and some techniques with even with processing deployment. Definitely another great transition of changes. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna next present a little bit more about what intermodality means, because just now we talked about a huge range of all the different possibilities in using in expressive arts. So what does even intermodal means? I think it's might be a new term for some of you, might be pretty familiar. So in the expressive arts, we embrace the connection and the interplay of the different arts modality. So including various forms such as visual, movement, dance, voice, rhythm, sound, drama, enactment, all forms of writing, poetry, storytelling, photography, and guided meditation. So the term intermodal comes from the work of Paulo Neal, one of the pioneers in this field. So it really kind of embrace that creativity is not limited to the use of only one modality. And sometimes through different modalities, the experience can be deepened and expand on the others. And just now, like I explained in an example about grief work, that it might start off with visualization, meditation, followed by an image, and it could be followed by writing. So we might be looking at an image that we created and given some prompts to write about the image. And there are many ways to do that. It could be like having a dialogue with the image. It could be using prompts such as once upon a time. It could be also just kind of using other more simple form like I see, I feel, I imagine. Okay. I can see more exciting chat going on. And again, here are some of the other examples of some of the work that I've created. So again, you can see we have soft pastel as a medium. We have watercolors, and the left hand side, the one that kind of look green, purplish tone. That was one of the work used on with the theme shadow and light. The middle one, yellow with kind of like a tree like, that is another work with kind of like developing vision. And you can see the right hand side. Even sometimes it could be like a folding little cards or folding the paper, changing the texture and using collage or color pencil or mixed media. In general, we are kind of embracing into this mode of there's no right, there's no wrong, there's just you, and being able to be free to engage with this art process and without that kind of judgment and that I'm not artistic. And I don't know any of you because I think a lot of us have been kind of restricted by this idea that one has to be artistic to engage in art. However, this expressive arts process take away that element. No one needs to have a degree in art school, but it's more inviting and helping people to really kind of like put down all those previous expectation, perfectionism, and things that tell yourself you're not enough, you can't participate in art because you're not talented, and put that away and using this process to really kind of explore some of that feelings. Okay, and we are at this point going to share a case example of some of my work with young people. This is one of the work that I partner with another group of theater in on campus in early, I would say, probably early March. And this part was about um so so this workshop allows the children who are invited to actually kind of see a show, Leonardo, a wonderful show about their terrible monsters. So this is part of the theater that presented this puppet show. Very exciting. Like you can see all the puppets from this book, Mo Williams. And for those of you who are working with children or might have kids, Mo Williams, great author. I love the books when I was reading for my kid as well. And our objective for this workshop is to utilize expressive arts as a tool to help children regulate strong emotions and promote well-being through reframing of their narrative. And very similar to some of you kind of explaining or indicating earlier about self-esteem, because again, this book is about this monster who wants to be a terrible monster, but is unable to because he was trying to scare different people and no one is afraid. And then this monster met like two kids who kind of felt like they don't fit in to their friend group and how they relate to each other. So in this workshop, after the children watched the puppet show, they were invited to kind of continue the process where um, we were giving them prompts to identify their feelings associated with something they're fearful or sad about. And I I think that over time, as children enter that middle school age, as they slowly begin to identify bigger feelings, whether it's this sadness, anger, fear, there's this almost like helplessness of like, what do I do with them? Am I allowed to show them? Because I seem to be receiving lots of disapproval with them. So this space is really for individuals to really kind of identify with something that may be struggling, maybe disturbing. And that's where we start off with. So children were making their own monster, and you can see, I'm going to go back to the slide. The red monster over here, you can see there is like two component. One that's the top and one that's the bottom. Both have the googly eyes. And with this kit in particular, when the this monster is completed, they were invited to talk about or write about in a group format, a group story together, starting with once upon a time, using their monster as the main character. And then subsequently, there's some debriefing available for them to kind of process the feelings with creating their own monster. I feel like the red monster that was created by this child was really interesting because when I inquire more, the child explained that there was two versions. There was the good and the bad. And I was like, oh, okay, interesting. Because again, there is always that kind of almost like a internal conflict, right? Who do I present? The good part of me, the bad part of me? How do I tell others about this part of myself? And that's are some of the kind of way to process feelings with children. So I'm gonna pause here and allow some time for questions or comments before we head forward. And I see some of the comments, yeah, about vulnerability, and there are some of the aspects that we're going to share later as well. Finding music, yeah, definitely as an expression. And some of my work in the past was also like using pop song for people to, tweens to even identify the feeling for the day, like using a pop song to kind of say out, what do you feel today? And that could be another check-in for today, right? Like, is your check-in for today shake it off? Is your check-in for today? I don't know. I'm not very attuned with the pop song, but I think my mine for today might be shake it off first. Okay, I see a question. Do you find that children in this age group reluctant to participate in arts expression? And it's true. I think there is that push and pull of like it's inviting, but we're not pushing anyone to participate if they are reluctant to. So it is really customizing to a place where it's appropriate, age appropriate, and the content are kind of like inviting without any pressure. And sometimes it's like you can see that you know, we might lay out different medium. Like for instance, this monster thing, it wasn't like a situation where you must use the particular medium like the magic model. It was a range of medium from strings to paper to um it could be like cloth. So I think the idea of like setting up to be very welcoming and also being kind of aware of time, because in children time zone things happen quick, so probably less time, but just kind of being able to gauge how they are, and less expectation in terms of like making sure that, oh, this workshop must look like a certain way, but more of like this is a process that we are inviting people to participate, and it might be taking a few more rounds for people to be familiar or open to join. So I'm gonna go forward to some of the principles. So as we look at the Rogerian core conditions for expressive arts facilitation, the first one, congruence. So what does that even mean? Like genuineness, authenticity. So we are really wanting to build trust and encourage vulnerability. And sometimes it might be hard. You might not know this particular group that it might be the first time you see them. So it might take some time to build that trust and vulnerability within that group. And for myself, I think like for today, as I prepare for this session, I'm happy to share like what was I doing just now? Playing my sound drum. And I think this is my own way of displaying the genuineness and authenticity as I try to connect with this group for the first time and inviting people to be vulnerable. Second condition, unconditional positive regard, creating a climate of acceptance and caring to promote change. So that willingness to sit with whatever feeling that show up. And I think that again, we want to go back to that self-esteem, that self-concept piece, right? That a lot of times, sometimes children feel like I'm not allowed to display this type of feeling because they are really kind of disapprove. But in this particular artwork that we are doing, we really want to promote that all feelings are accepted, all feelings are welcome. And that's what I always like kind of tell my clients that, I don't know if that's like a good, bad, because that feels very judgmental, right? But I see that feelings and there's a feeling wheel I always like kind of use as a tool. They're all just different and they're all different in color. And that's it. Allowing that feeling and willing to sit with whatever that show up with them. And third, we can see empathic understanding, listening and sensing accurately the meanings and the feelings that's communicated. So sometimes this might not be that easy because it does take the facilitator and an extra effort to be attuned to what is transpired when they kind of bring up. And for instance, the child that show with the two sides of the monster, I think what I'm sensing is that there is this two parts of this child that they identify with, and they felt like one part is better than the other. And it seems like they have identified these two components. And my response was probably going to be sounds like, okay, it sounds like there's two parts of you that you kind of identify in the process. I'm kind of interested to hear what these two parts are. So instead of like kind of putting a judgment to what was showing up, we really want to use statements that are empathic response. So for sometimes, a child might bring up um an image or artwork and criticizing that image like, oh, it's ugly. This is really untidy. Or the colors clash. Or this monster looks terrible. Or this monster is a terrible monster because it's always angry. And this is the time that as facilitator where you can appropriately jump in and say some empathic response. Like it sounds as though the monster in you is blaming yourself for how you feel all the time. And I want you to know that you are an important part of this group, even with your difficult feelings. So we're trying to name the difficult feelings without like judging that um, component that show up. And then we want to also be able to facilitate that openness to experience. So creating that lack of defensiveness and ability to perceive the moment as it is without prejudgment, um, with lacking in rigidity and a tolerance for ambiguity. And I agree. I think with children, sometimes this can be really hard. Some of them can be really rigid, and to introduce like ambiguity can be really difficult. So I think we try to like take it a little at each time. And when working with children, I think there's a certain level we do need to be concrete, right? When we give instructions like the monster show, that's part we can be concrete, telling them the instructions, how to identify feelings. Maybe we might need to throw in a few feeling words, like 20 of them, and let them pick their choices. But that openness to experience is really creating that safety and that container to let them know that, I'm here, I'm willing to join you in this experience. And I'm willing to kind of be okay that we don't necessarily have an answer right now. And we're still working through some of these difficult feelings at this time. Um, Another facilitator tip, so it's the internal locus of evaluation when a person can listen to the response of others but not be overly concerned with their reactions. So this one is really kind of more for facilitator as you're kind of like doing this work. Some of us would be like, oh my, are they gonna like evaluate me, giving me like a rate of like 1 to 5? In like, are they gonna give me 5 after this whole webinar? And I think that's the piece that a lot of us or a lot of times when I see in my work, the anxiety piece, when we are creating content and delivering content, to be mindful when you as a facilitator doing this, that really, we really just are here to kind of help people and not to be overly concerned about the reaction of others such that it impedes your delivery of the content, that all you're thinking is, oh my, how are they thinking about my facilitation, rather than actually being present in the moment, listening to the participants and joining them in their experience. And then this part, of course, climate. As just now we mentioned briefly, we don't want to be judgmental. We don't need to kind of even give comments like, oh, this is really perfect. Yeah, I mean, we really want to skew away from anything that's evaluated, even though it's like positive sort of quote quote, but we still want to skew away from anything that kind of feels that judgmental vibe. So we really want to really put on that invitation of, oh, okay, we it seems like um I'll go with the witnessing guideline later, but I think the key is we really want to skew away from anything that has a rating. Like this is perfect. This looks like 100%. Oh, this looks like 50% in my mind. Or your colors clash. Or your sculpture is ugly. or you could work harder in this area. And finally, we have this part of giving permission. There is no right or wrong way to do this, even to invite. Just now, someone will say, what if someone is reluctant to participate in it? And we really, as the adult or the caregiver provider, can really encourage, like, hey, there's no wrong or right way to do this. Try not to be concerned with others, how, they think. And maybe if you want to do this your style, you're welcome to do it. Feel free to be messy and encourage their different way of exploration. And as the facilitator, sometimes it can be also helpful to be joining in the creative process. So instead of like just looking at them doing the work, you are welcome to kind of even like maybe create some image with them, or making that touching the clay or moving around with them, just to kind of be part of that group process. Okay, this is the witnessing guidelines. So once the participants create the process, or participate in the process, and an image or artwork arrive, well, what we can do is using words like I notice, I feel, I experience, I see. So what we don't want is avoid assumptions and interpretations of what the art looks like. So if you notice, just now I was describing some of the artwork that was shown. I said, oh, that one is a blue green tone image, and this one is a yellow with green and brown, and the other one has collage and words on it. And notice that I didn't say this one is a heart with blue flowers. That one is a tree with green leaves. Or that one is an image of a scenery. So again, we want to take one step back instead of jumping into telling the person who created the art that what their art is. We want to be the person that actually invites that process. So we will ask them, would you be willing to tell me more about your art, instead of jumping into to already say, oh, you draw a tree. Can you tell me where this tree is growing, or how this tree is done? So keeping it really open-ended. So some of the prompts you can see over here is, how did you feel while making the art? How did you feel after I asked you these questions? And some of the other kind of things that we can kind of gather from, maybe, is this color making you feel a certain way? Can you share with me? Are there parts of your drawing that you feel disturbed? And sometimes um you know people can create an image and they don't like it, or maybe a certain part they like, a certain part they don't like. So we are kind of creating space to ask that question. What do you like best about your image? And other questions like, what have you learned from this image about what you feel? And are these emotions related to a particular issue or concern? So of course, we have to kind of like make the language age appropriate and adjust accordingly. So this is the prompt that summary, like, I witness others' artwork the way I would like my own to be witnessed. Witness with compassion and authentic engagement. And as we talk about metaphor, right? The facilitator role, teacher, childcare staff, coach, counselor. So it is really kind of like thinking through what role are you in, and being able to feel like confident enough to guide the individuals or the children through this process. So I'm sure there's a lot of attendees. Some of you might be in different capacity, different roles. So you might want to kind of also sit kind of create your content according to what is appropriate for your role. Is it more for relaxation? Is it more for creative life? Is it more for recovery? So it is essential that each person consider where and how they are qualified to guide the others. So the metaphor of like the um, person, kind of in the forest and having a guide to guide through them. And it just really depends on the different skills that some of you might have to be able to construct it differently and to offer different tools through the forest. Some of you might be able to offer more. Some of you might be able to offer just something slightly different. Okay. And at this point, I would like to invite all of you, the attendees, and maybe even the panelists, to get a piece of paper, pen, pencil, so piece of paper and a writing material, basically. And please choose an object that is near you. So the object could be a piece of, recycled paper, it could be a rock, it could be a stuffed toy, it could be a pillow, it could be a plant. Um, it could be something meaningful, an object that you have near your table, near your workstation. Just pick any object. I'm just going to give people about 30 seconds to kind of get through to this process. As you walk around, maybe in your space, engaging in a little bit of movement, and just kind of pick an object. Okay. And as you take time to take the next 30 seconds just to kind of like feel the object that you pick with your sensation, with your hands, or if you want to like just kind of rub the object on your face, if it's appropriate, just to spend some time to pause and look and hold the object, whether is it the texture, the color, the shape, how hard or soft it is. And then we're going to do some quick writing, and that will be another 5 minutes for that quick write. And we're going to play some music in the background just for people to kind of get into the experience of this process. So I think we can probably get the music going. And the prompt is these 3 prompts: I see, I feel, I imagine. So do some quick write to this object. I see, you write maybe 3 to 5 sentences. I feel, write 3 to 5 sentences. I imagine, write 3 to 5 sentences. And if we can have the music playing right now, that would be great. All right, and we will kind of give everyone about 1 more minute just to finish out where you are with your writing before I kind of give that last instruction. All right. I hope everyone was able to spend some time just to kind of engage in this activity. And again, as facilitator, always kind of encourage everyone to just participate as well, kind of let down your guard and trust this process. So I'm gonna go ahead. And the next step, I would like to invite everyone to review your writing and underline the keywords that stood out to you from I see, I feel, I imagine. So probably giving everyone some time just to kind of take the next 1 minute to read your own content and underline the keywords that stood out to you. And when you're ready, I would like to invite all 60 of you, and it'll be really exciting just to see what we have. Place some of the keywords you notice in the chat. Place some of the keywords you notice in the chat. Again, I'm inviting everyone. There's no right or wrong. There's no forcing. It's whatever that you are feeling like you're willing to share. And again, this process is really not about forcing, but encouraging for individuals who are ready to share or feel open to share. So encouraging people when you're ready, underline the keywords and to kind of put them in the chat box. Thank you. I see peace. Thank you. I see crack, broken edges, sand, wonder, intense, connected, calmness, happy, faster, calm, relaxed, comfy, feel the moments, peaceful, enjoyment, safety. Thank you. Restful. Thank you. Calm and happy. Thank you. And I think as some of you can see, I'm kind of doing the process as I'm also teaching the process as well as individuals put in the different words and I'm acknowledging it with openness. I would like to maybe be the person that actually show a little bit more vulnerability and actually share my writing as just to kind of demonstrate the process a little deeper. And sometimes reading out loud can also help people to learn a little bit more of this process. So I pick a ceramic piece at my office that I made previously, and I'm going to kind of read out loud my writing of I see, I feel, and I imagine. I see carbon, colors, dark, reflective, circle. I see small little holes in my cup. I feel wholesome, excitement, coming to a full circle to my work. I feel the fruition of my ceramic journey. I imagine more to expand, to share, to lead, to encounter, and to journey. Thank you all. And with this, I want to kind of give a quick instructions of our expressive arts exercise. I know we are scheduled somewhere in the summer for a second session. And prior to that, people can probably use this opportunity or time to use the keywords as you type out in the chat as a prompt to create an image prior to our next webinar. So feel free to use that. And I'm going to end my presentation with this quote from Sean McNiff. Trusting the process is based on the belief that something valuable will emerge when we step into the unknown. Negative and fearful experiences can really test our capacity for positive reflection. When I enact my grief in my art, they became my partner in creation, and my relationship to them is transformed. Thank you, and I invite some questions before we wrap up for today.
Thank you, Miss Lee. As people are putting questions into the chat, I just wanted to thank you for what you brought today, what you and Dr. Tan both brought today. This little exercise that you just did to show us was really powerful, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to engage in it. While people are entering their questions, I did have a question, and I'm glad that you read what you wrote because it was helpful for me. When you read the "I feel" statements, you identified like emotion and feelings, and I wrote down feelings of the object, like what I've tangibly felt. And I know there's like no judgment in all of this process, right?
Correct.
So both of those options would be a part of that process, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So again, no right or wrong. So it's less directive, like you must feel excitement. You can't. So I think you can see the difference. Like I feel excitement, but I also feel a fruition of my ceramic journey. So fruition is not necessarily like a feeling, but when I wrote it, I felt like this is where I want it to be. So again, I think just kind of creating that openness and space for individuals who are writing and come in with a place of inquiry. For instance, for what I wrote, individuals, another facilitator can have inquiry like, oh, look at your writing and I'm hearing some excitement. I'm curious about what full circle means to you, and I'm curious about what fruition for this part of the journey meant.
Yeah, great. Thank you. This was
Mhm.
really I'm very excited about what we just did in the last 10 minutes. That was a really, really cool experience. I'm really grateful for both of you being here.
Mhm.
Well, if there aren't any questions that you all have right now to put in the chat, that's totally fine. If they come to you later, you are more than welcome to send those questions to us using that address on the screen, and we'll be sure to get them to Dr. Tan or Miss Lee so that they can address them for you. Um, Again, I just want to say thank you so much for being here, all of the participants, but especially Dr. Tan and Miss Lee. This was really, really, really interesting and a very cool experience. As you mentioned, and I put in the chat just a little bit ago, the Dr. Tan and Miss Lee will be back with us on July 25th for a second session around this topic. But most recently, what's coming up is our May 14th webinar. Today, we were talking about children ages 6 to 12, but on May 14th, the next webinar in our Thriving Together series, it's going to focus on how our personal and professional relationships with the youth, meaning youth, adolescents, so kind of this next age group of, say, 13-ish to 22-ish, how our personal and professional relationships with them, those who are in our care, can foster and support educational and social emotional development for them. So we did early childhood a couple weeks ago. Today we did this middle childhood, and on May 14th we're going to kind of discuss this kind of last third of childhood, if you will. So please check the webinar event page, which will get dropped into the chat in just a moment. Excuse me, for information on CE credits and for the May 14th webinar, and also how to register. So today's webinar offers several different types of CE credits and a certificate of attendance for general use. To receive either of these items, you will all need to complete a two-step process that includes an evaluation and a follow-up survey of some kind, depending on the type of CE you require. First, you'll complete the evaluation. After that, you'll see a message where you can select the link for the type of CE credit that you need, and then you'll be directed to that second survey. After successfully completing the second step, a certificate will be automatically emailed to you within 24 to 48 hours. Some email providers may direct your certificate to a spam folder, so please check your spam folder if you do not receive it. If it's not there, please email us using the address on the screen, and that will be popped into the chat momentarily. Excuse me. At this point, the live audience sees a link in the chat to the evaluation. You may need to copy and paste that link into a new browser. For those who may be watching this on demand, or if you need to come back later to complete the CE process, you'll find the link to the evaluation on the webinar event page. There you will see a purple button, just like the one on the right side of the screen. Clicking on the purple button that's on the event page will take you to that evaluation. If for some reason you get an error message when you try to access the evaluation, please read that error message. Sometimes websites might be blocked by a user's settings or firewalls. If that's the case, you'll need to contact your organization's IT department for assistance. But if you still receive an error message, take a screenshot of it and attach it to an email to us. For questions regarding CE credits or anything else about today's presentation, please email our team using the address on the screen, and that is currently in the chat pod. Finally, be sure to visit us at our website, oneop.org, to explore upcoming events, articles, resources, and more. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We'll stick around for just a few more minutes for those of you who might want to grab links or information from the chat. We thank you all again for attending, and we especially thank Dr. Tan and Miss Lee, and we wish everyone a pleasant rest of your day.